Hello, we're here at BioEurope in Hamburg at the 2019 meeting, which is the 25th anniversary. This is a meeting where all the sort of stakeholders in the industry get together, are able to have sort of conversations about opportunities to license, sort of discussion of the assets, and therefore it's always great to actually sort of catch up to sort of see how people are progressing. So I'm joined by Joe Dupere, who's the CEO of Rexgenero, a London-based cell therapy company. So Joe, we've spoken a few times, and it's been interesting to watch the progression of Rexgenero as you're going through the sort of registration, etc. So your lead asset is for critical limb ischemia. So where are we at the moment, and what's the journey been like since the last time we spoke?
So we've been in the process of registering the various sites that we have around Europe that are participating in our clinical trial. We've been enrolling patients into that trial. So we're now sort of getting visibility on the full enrollment, which is the first milestone, and then we have a year later than that. We'll have our data from that. So that process is conversations with the local regulators. We're a cell therapy company, so those regulations are newly tested, and so they're not entirely harmonized between the different European countries. There's a lot of dialogue with the physicians and the surgeons that we cooperate with in our trial, so they understand our product, its place in the treatment of this disease, and understanding when they can bring in patients and what potential benefit they would bring.
Okay, so I can imagine sort of being at the sort of almost like a pioneer or at the cutting edge. Some of these conversations are probably the first time that people are having these conversations. How do you sort of manage that challenge where you're almost having to educate the people on the other side of the table?
Yeah, I mean, most of the surgeons that we collaborate with, they're familiar with cell therapies in a broad sense. I mean, there has been some history to cell therapies over the last 15, 20 years, but the challenge for us is to really demonstrate that the superiority in terms of the efficacy that we can show and how that fits in with their practice. And that's also marrying what they do already, which is a series of surgical and endovascular procedures where the cell therapies can come in and really turbocharge that and then have a really substantial impact on their patients, because the procedures that they use to date, they will get some local improvement in blood flow, but not to the foot, and not to the foot is where you have the ulcers, the foot is where you have the pain, and so that's the area that our cells will go down, revascularize, and then reverse all of those really debilitating symptoms that these patients have.
So in that process where you've been setting all this up, is there, knowing what you now know, is there anything you would do differently?
I think the engagement with those surgeons, I mean, the earlier that is done, and really to walk through every aspect of that. I mean, we live and breathe our design of our study, but surgeons are coming into this new, and so them to really understand how that works and really assist them in that journey with us, so that they can bring patients in, and we make it as easy as possible for them to participate, easy as possible for them to bring patients in, so that they're focused on treating these patients and the benefits that this treatment can potentially bring. So
I mean, your business model is to take this all the way to the market yourselves. So that's going to require presumably additional resources.
Yeah.
So where are you in that? And again, how are those, as you progressed? How have those discussions evolved?
Yeah. I mean, we've been primarily focused on our phase 3 clinical trials, the setup of those, the enrolling of those, and the gathering data of them. But there's a whole range of other activities that we need to focus on as we get nearer to the market. So one is scaling up the manufacture, so that's a truly commercial manufacturing process that you can really deliver the product to as many patients as possible. The second is really understanding how this would be used in practice. So from a commercial perspective, how would you sell this product? How would you position it with the physicians? How would you get the surgeons to understand where this treatment would work in their general practice? So those are sort of core aspects around our current product and our lead indication, but we're also very much focused on expanding that out into additional sub-indications and also to expanding into the US, where we've needed to be operating in Europe before we were able to go in the US, and we're really gearing up to move the study into the US.
Sure. And have you been trying to sort of develop all these resources in-house, or to what extent are you using external partners?
So, it's a combination. We have a core clinical team in-house. We have, all the manufacturing primarily is in-house, although we collaborate with the German Red Cross in Frankfurt. But we also work very closely with Syneos. So Syneos is our global partner on management of the clinical trial. So they conduct all of the monitoring, all of the day-to-day interactions with sites. And we use also a number of industry experts to help us understand how the product works, how it's going to be used in practice across a whole range of disciplines.
Yeah, and as I said, sort of if you sort of think about the resource, so typically a biotech will either go at the capital markets to raise money to sort of push it towards the finish line, or will maybe get a strategic partner from a pharmaceutical company. So at a meeting like this, there are opportunities to meet those people. Have you sort of seen any sort of, with cell therapy now becoming a little bit more mainstream, have you seen any sort of change in the kind of demeanor of the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, I think on the investor side, there's certainly a lot better understanding of cell therapies, gene therapies. There's been a lot of investment in that area. I think it's somewhat mixed. There was a lot of money that went into the immuno-oncology space. Some of those have been successful, some of them have been less successful. So I think that there's more an appreciation of companies like ours, which are developing cell therapies, but not for oncology, albeit for a very large indication. And I think when you talk about the strategics, the core value proposition of the disease and the treatment of the disease and the unmet need of the disease, has been understood from the beginning. But utilization of a cell therapy to be able to address that market is something that they're getting much more familiar with, certainly around things like the manufacture, some of the regulation that's specific to cell therapies, and also the commercial path when you're dealing with a curative product, where you give a single dose of the product and you expect to get a cure for the patient.
Right, and sort of preparation for the launch of a product. Just sort of say you're doing the phase 3 trials at the moment here in Europe. The idea is then to presumably do a sort of similar trial in the US. At what point have you actually started the commercial countdown?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think to some extent we started the commercial countdown right from the very beginning. We understood that some of the complexities around our product would mean that there's a lot of things that we would need to prove out. So certainly on the manufacturing side, we developed our manufacturing to support our clinical trials, but we've done a lot of work to enable us to scale that manufacturing up so that at the point that we hit the market, we can supply the market.
Yeah. I meant more in terms of actually getting into the marketplace and getting pricing and reimbursement. I was just wondering where you are on that.
Actually very early on we did a lot of work on looking at the health economics of the product. This is an issue that has been quite common for a lot of cell therapies where they're very expensive to manufacture. Ours is actually a lot less expensive to manufacture, but we looked at what are the quality of life benefits for our product? What are the cost savings that the health system would expect to save by using our product? So that has informed our pricing strategy. We've had a number of conversations with reimbursement agencies about that approach and what we need to do to build that up. We've done quite a bit of work on thinking through what is the patient journey. So once a patient comes in with this condition and they would be eligible for our treatment, what does that mean from a commercial perspective when we're reaching out to those surgeons to use our product?
Okay, and what's the sort of the proposed timeline, if everything goes well, that you would actually start getting it into the hands of the surgeons?
So, I mean, from a European perspective, we would expect that we would have our data in around 2 years' time,
Right.
and so then it's then the filing and approval process. We would expect to get an accelerated review. So, we're looking in the sort of 3 to 4 year time frame to be able to get the product on the market. But there are also a number of opportunities to make the product available before that. Both through compassionate use programs, which we're actively involved in, particularly in Spain, but also other early access schemes. There are some good schemes in the UK, in Germany, actually in many of the other countries in Europe, so that would really genuinely be able to get the product in the hands of the surgeon, treating patients and having benefit.
Great. So, well, Joe, thanks for coming along and sharing the story with us.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Cheers.
So if you enjoyed that video and benefit from some of the insights that were available, why don't you subscribe to the channel? And then you can ensure that you don't miss any upcoming videos that we have.